from Google. But yeah, I guess you could think of dinosaur being old school, or dinosaurs actually laying eggs. So, well, hello everyone. We're officially live. It is Wednesday, November 13th, 2 o'clock Central, the best time zone, 3 o'clock Eastern. And just appreciate you all spending some time being with us here today. We have a awesome conversation with, I always live by this phrase, surround yourself with smarter people than yourself. And today I'm doing just that with 4 really awesome, intelligent, pragmatic practitioners in the fire service. So I'm excited to talk you through it. And today we're going to give you a little bit of a teaspoon into what to expect from the upcoming Technology Summit International happening December 4, 5, 6 in Oklahoma City. So thank you again. If you haven't already, I'm going to put this in the chat, but this is the link to the website. There is the full calendar there. There is the registration, the hotel link. So I just put it in the chat, but also you can pull out your phone, scan it. Got a nice little dinosaur there, which could be symbolic of, whether it's we're kind of living in the Stone Age, or as Chief John Oates just mentioned, of, dinosaurs laying eggs for seeds of the future. So a little symbolism in our QR code here. Not quite sure, but nonetheless, there we are. And then just kind of to let you know, just kind of a couple little housekeeping things. There's some nuances here, just letting you know that we're just on camera right now, so you can hear us and listen to us. But we really strongly encourage you to fire up the chat, ask questions, ask comments, because this is really meant to be a two-way dialogue between all of us. There are, again, the chat and Q&A functions there on the right. And we're going to dive into the panels here in a second. But one thing that I want you all to be thinking about as in relation to this in the Technology Summit International, this is really meant to be a forum for you to learn, a two-way dialogue where this is, yes, we are talking at you to some extent, but then we're going to be talking with each other. And I want you to be joining the conversation. And at TSI, this is not meant to be something where you're just checked out, where you're using your phone or computer doing something else. I want you to be present. I want you to listen. I want you to think critically, and I want you to learn. That's the whole point of why we create content. I don't want to just create content just because it's cool and we get Instagram likes. That's not the point. So I'm really hopeful and excited that you're going to dive into this today. So high level, I'm going to do quick introductions. Then each speaker is going to do a quick intro. Then we are going to do quick little 3 to 5 minute pitches, more kind of presentations from the 4 panelists. And then we are going to kind of have it be an open dialogue, open Q&A from everyone. So my name is Kevin Sofin. I'm a tech advisor with IAFC, founder of smartfirefighting.com, and wear a few different other hats in the fire industry with startups and nonprofits. We have Chief John Oates, the president and CEO of International Public Safety Data Institute, Jason Serrano, the SAM business line leader for IDEX and Fire and Safety, Dr. Kate Capallo, the now with DC Fire and EMS, Deputy Director of Health and Safety, and Marcus Edwards, the CEO of StationWise. So a really star-studded crew here. And without further ado, again, I want to encourage everyone. Oh, also special shout out to an awesome company that's continued to support all things TSI before, during, and after. But we got Jason here from IDEX, but IDEX will be prominently featured at TSI, and just really excited to learn about Jason's story. I mean, Jason, your story is awesome, and I can't wait to dive into it more, from drawing up stuff on the napkin and turning it into something that's changing the fire service. So kudos to you. And again, here's the QR code just to kind of check out TSI. But I'm going to first throw it to John, then Marcus, and Kate, and Jason. If you want to give just a minute-long intro of who you are, high level, and then we're going to go into the kind of presentations after that. So Chief John Oates, if you could start us off.
Thank you, Kevin. I appreciate it, and I appreciate the opportunity to share with this group today, because they're all 4 people that are doing fantastic work. My name is John Oates. I've spent 33 years in the career fire service, all of it in central Connecticut. In late 21, I had the opportunity to take over the International Public Safety Data Institute, which is the home of Fire Cares, which is a community risk reduction tool, N4's Analytics, which is our near real-time analytics platform, and the N4's Exposure Tracker mobile app, which allows firefighters to track what they've gone to. If you had asked 22-year-old me riding facing backwards on engine 2 that I would end up doing this in my life, I would have told you were nuts. But as it evolved through my career, from being a boss, being a shift commander, being a chief of department, you start to go like, all right, there are things that we can do and technologies that we can employ that enable the work of the firefighters on the street to do it better, stronger, smarter, safer. And we've done some of that, but there's so much more that we need to do from a fire service perspective. So appreciate the opportunity to be here and learning from certainly three other really, really sharp people. And you too, Kevin. That wasn't a shot.
Thanks, John. I appreciate it. All right, Marcus, we'll throw it to you.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Marcus, founder, CEO of StationWise, and we build staffing software for fire departments. So helping, put butts in seats, and then going a level beyond when you think of helping integrate everything across the department. All of my family are firefighters, so I like to say this is my take on the family business. My dad, his dad, and then two uncles, all in the fire service in Illinois and Missouri, and then actually started StationWise while in business school at Stanford. Interviewed about 40 fire chiefs across 12 states and said, what's the number one problem you have with your department? What would you change? 90% said technology, and specifically interoperability within that. So we started with staffing, building a lot more software from that. But because it touches every single user across the whole department, touches budgeting, payroll, we have a messaging communication system within the tool already. So trying to work towards, that interoperability and letting your data be your data and sharing it wherever you need to. So that's our, mantra. But yeah, it's a bit about us.
Thanks, Marcus. I'll throw it to Kate.
Hi, everyone. Sorry.
Sorry, no, my bad. Quick high-level intro.
No. Okay. So I'm Dr. Kate. I started my career working with the U.S. Navy as a research psychologist in human factors. And then I quickly learned from the literature and from a bunch of different aspects related to the fire service that there's a lot we can do in this space to support firefighters, especially when it comes to line of duty deaths, preventing injuries. And as we look at, some of the challenges with readiness in the workforce now, what does that look like? Those are some things that really interest me. So I recently transitioned to DC Fire, and I am supporting Chief Sean Downs in the Health and Safety Division, which is a really awesome opportunity. I'm really grateful. Shout out to Chief Donnelly and the entire command staff. DC Fire is doing some really great things. But I'm totally honored to be here and to talk to you a little bit today about what readiness looks like and what that means from just to kind of give you a 10,000 foot view. So I used to work with Navy pilots. And when we talk about readiness, there's a couple different areas that we really focus on, right? We focus on are you trained to the level that you need to be trained? Looking at comprehensive assessments. So are you physically fit? Are you able to do the job that you need to do? And so when we look at these across the fire service, a lot of times we focus tech on operations. But I think one of the things you'll hear today in this webinar is really important. There are aspects of technology that touch everything that we do in the fire service. So from planning to community risk reduction to how we treat our firefighters and build a work environment that's safe and effective. And so I'm really honored to talk to you all today a little bit about that.
Thanks, Kate. And Jason?
Thanks, Kevin. Thanks for inviting me. And like everyone said, this is it's a pretty great group to be around. So pretty honored to be amongst all you all. I do work with IDEX Fire and Safety. My background was in firefighting. So I believe I had the ADD of career choices. So I went to school for mechanical engineering, got on a volunteer fire department, loved it, gave up an engineering job, got in the fire service full time as a medic firefighter for almost 20 years. 10 years ago, conceptualized basically an automated fire pump. So actually 14 years ago now. So during that process, as Kevin said, it went from napkin to fire truck to a corporation and now into the fire service. So my current life, I had to leave the fire service and now I get to work kind of between the commercial side and the research and development side of IDEX Fire and Safety. So I'm very fortunate. I get to kind of lead the way when it comes to water flow and data collection in the fire service. So I truly get to work with a group that we get to decide what everyone gets to comment on next. So pretty excited to talk about some of that stuff. And Kevin, thank you for the kind introduction.
Of course. Thank you all. And as you can see, just an awesome crew of different stakeholders here. And one thing I would love if in the chat, right, where are you from? Where are you? What department you with, which company you with, which organization you with, and if you're coming to TSI, we sure would like to have you there and learn more. So Now we're going to go into a couple quick, short, sort of high level 3 to 5 minute presentations from each speaker. And then it's going to be kind of open kitchen table talk, Q&A, kind of diving into everything. So we'll go in that same order: John, Marcus, Kate, Jason. So John, I'll throw it to you to kind of give us some of your 2 cents, and floor is yours.
Fantastic. Thank you. So let's think for a minute, because technology takes a whole lot of different forms. And even amongst this small panel, we're operating in a tech space that is the fire service tech space, but doing all vastly different things. So when we talk about technology, or we talk about knowledge transfer, we talk about data, it's like to do what, right? Like, are we looking to make a process better, or is the technology just going to make it different? And I think we need to look very carefully about, when we're making technology choices, what that looks like. Is it has to improve the service delivery to the person that lives at the corner of walk and don't walk. So when they pick up the phone and call 911, they're getting a better level of service than what they're getting today. And that raises the question, like, okay, what does better look like? How well do we understand exactly how our community is affected by fire? And it's one of the things that we've do a deep dive into for our customers, to help them understand, because we get very, very fixated on what we do. We're going to fires, we're going to crashes, we're going to medical emergencies, we're going to technical rescues, hazmat incidents, transportation vehicles, blah, 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 all that stuff. We have an idea about the what. We also sort of, if you ask any firefighter on a piece of fire apparatus, it's like, okay, what address do you go to most frequently in your community? And they're going to rattle off 2 or 3 that they've been to a lot in their career. But are those the most prevalent that's supported by the data? What does the data say? And then the last piece that a lot of departments miss is who. Like, who are we providing service to? It's in both the analytics platform and in FireCares is leveraging the census data, leveraging the social vulnerability index data within the census data to understand who we're providing service to. And it becomes a massive community risk assessment tool that allows us to tailor our risk reduction programs in a very, very audience specific way, rather than just going, okay, we're going to do smoke alarm installations across the entire community. And again, I'm not diminishing that for a minute. Very, very valuable. But how about we look at places that don't have smoke alarms? How many different languages are spoken in your schools, in your community, that now, all right, do we have messaging to address all those language gaps? Because with language gaps often comes cultural expectations of what your fire department is, how your culture interacts with fire, either from a ceremonial basis, from a cooking basis, from like what, and it's different, right? So we need to be smart enough to not only understand where we're going, what we're doing, where we're doing it, and who we're serving, because then you can start to figure out, what does my organization need? You can't, and I'll speak badly of my own, I'll lose my fire chief magic secret decoder ring here in a minute, but you can't, I don't care what board of governance you have anymore. You can't walk into a city council meeting or a board of fire commissioners, whatever, and go, I think, I feel, I believe. You can't, not that it was ever right, but fire chiefs pulled that off for decades. You have to go in there with sensible data that tells a story. And this is the piece, and I appreciate what Dr. Kate's doing, because we've had this conversation before, is yes, the data needs to tell a story, but somebody still needs to tell that story and explain everything about the fire department. Explain why AR, VR for training is important. Explain why we need better information on who is actually riding on our fire apparatus, and or who is putting an application in to join our fire department. Who decided that I'm going to leave your fire department because you're not very good and I'm going to go work for your neighbor. Whatever those things are, is how do we use that information in order to get better? And in a lot of places, it's crawl, walk, run, right? There are a lot of people that we talk about that are just struggling to get a fire apparatus out the door with some semblance of people on it to go answer the call to the citizen. 100% get that. I worked in a community that was poor and broke, and we had to innovate because we didn't have money. You can't use money as an excuse not to invest in the technologies that are necessary to provide service to your people, because often it's not money that you don't have money, it's what you're spending the money that you do have on. So I think there's a lot of interesting things that we can do in this space. When Marco mentioned interoperability, and we think about interoperability in our brain as us and everybody else, I want you to think for a minute about how technology can help you with interoperability, internal interoperability. How do we message across and have complete understanding across our entire organization? How can technology help us with that? How do we make sure that the messaging and the way we do things from a policy and procedure perspective, like everything that we do it our department way every single time in a repeatable fashion? And the last thing I will go, and this is a tangent in a weird different direction, but it's, if you know where my brain is, you're not surprised. It's, there's people that are like, well, artificial intelligence is going to fix that for me. It's like, well, no, it's not. Because the challenge in the AI space is if you have AI that's not trained on quality data, you're just going to have crappy AI. And since we struggle from a fire service perspective in the data space, and we're taking steps to make that better, when we think about, and I saw it the other day in an exhibit at a fire service conference that, this vendor said, now with AI, and I'm like, all right, cool. To do what? And I think some of it's up to us to clearly articulate is, here's the artificial intelligence tool. Here's what it does. Here's how it's trained. Here's how we use it to help you get better. But that has become the buzzword of this decade, is like, it's got AI. So it must be perfect, right? And it's like, and I think the other thing too, is there's a lot of stuff. Is it AI or is it just I? And that's a conversation for another thing. So that's what's rattling around my brain today, Kevin.
Only like 20 quotable moments there. I love that. Is it AI or just I? Wow.
Yeah.
That was deep. All right. Well, we're going to keep going around the horn here. And again, we're going to leave it open to audience and community engagement. So we'll go Marcus, Kate, Jason. So Marcus, floor is yours. Thanks, John, for sharing that.
Yeah, agree with all those perspectives. I'll just start by adding on to them. So like I mentioned, we started on the theme of interoperability. So, staffing is the software core we're building because we found a lot of departments struggle to find additional budget if it's not replacing something that exists that they already have budget for. So while it might be more than your traditional staffing software, we do so much more. We help with all your integrations, all the customization years down the line, and customer support, and we don't price by user. So trying to make that, fit with the theme of interoperability. But the one thing I really want to hammer home that I really agree that Chief Oates mentioned was, like, our motto has been data for decisions, not reports, for that exact reason. Like, my background was being the advanced analytics trainer for a consulting firm. So anytime the consultants couldn't open something in Excel, they would come to me and we would figure out, how do you present this in a dashboard? Or if you hover over something, maybe it has a different message that warns you what you're supposed to do. So taking a lot of those same things to build, staffing gets really complicated really quickly. Like Chief Oates said, we have to follow all our rules, all our overtime policies, our labor practices, or we could have issues, or like Kate's working on, you could have issues if you're overstaffing people, or you're not advocating enough for your city to give you more budget because your people are struggling and overworked. So it's a really tricky balance to strike. And the information sharing not being there, or there being so much info or a lot of different places to log in, but none of them are adding to the conversation. That's a lot of the challenge, I would say. So that's why we really push on, we actually don't let you run traditional reports except for like a simple payroll Excel. Anything that you show in our tool, it's an actual analytics dashboard. And we try to make it really robust to start to say, what are the things I care about from this? And then, like Kevin mentioned, you need to have the data in place to get to AI being useful. So we found we're actually adding whole new data fields. We're creating whole new detail codes and pay codes and different ways of tracking if people are acting out of rank, because that will then let you use that AI, AI as it is just a tool. It just says, based on your data, what can we ask? But that's where it gets really fire chief friendly to say, hey, I want to see, what did I spend in overtime in the last, the last X amount of time, or what's my cost per call and how is that trending and how does that vary by station or by shift? And being able to, just from a budget point of view, ask simple questions, but then think of that going forward. I want to build a new station. Well, it's almost certainly not a matter of if you're going to build that station, it's when and where. And where might be decided because you might already have the land picked out. So there's only so many variables you can control, and that when is a huge part of it. And it's not just, currently it's a financial decision. What it should be is layering in, what's the financial impact? how will our response times change if we don't build this station? Or how will they, stay the same when we were trying to drive them down and hiring for it? And then also, again, what's that like mental and physical load that we're putting on our workforce? And it's becoming way less sustainable for folks, especially on the Gen Z side. So how do you make it more of a career and give them the commitment that you're investing in technology that can show we're going to make this, a long-term, play for you, and not something that we're burning you out quickly on, or we're just optimizing the overtime dollars in 1 year, because that obviously, isn't something everybody wants or can do all the time. So trying to make sure that we can also help with, staffing, so to speak, but really workforce management, as we call it. So, helping message folks, or if you want to send out those surveys to say, hey, why did you leave to go to that neighboring department? Like Kate mentioned, a lot of different ways we could track and try to say, here's the information across different systems. Now, what's the so what? What AI tool do you want, or what questions do you have is what you should start with? What are the outcomes you're aiming for? And then work your way back from what technology or systems or processes. A lot of it is change management, quite honestly. What are the things that we need to get us to that end goal outcome? And you might be surprised that you can do it with less money, less time, a lot less daunting of an effort, but it does take more work to go out, search for things. Like, it's a really tough, industry for startups or new companies to thrive in, because the adoption rate is so slow. So just being really open to adopting or trying new things, or especially doing pilots that are, pretty risk-free on both parts, that can be a great way to try out new technology and get to that, end goal that you're aiming for, instead of getting distracted by the shiny, flashy object and then not having the outcome solved and wasting a lot of time and effort, or going through RFPs or any of that stuff.
Marcus, well said. And the whole aspect of change management, I think, is one of the biggest aspects in public safety, where I think we can all agree we have a lot of the technology and funding at hand, but it's often a human issue that's creating the barrier to doing something new. So I want to expand upon that after Kate and Jason both go. So I'll throw it to Kate and then Jason. So Kate, floor is yours, and thanks, Marcus, for your comments.
Thank you so much. This is great conversation. I'm super excited. So as I mentioned, for those of you that don't know me, I have a background in human factors, and specifically my dissertation and the related research that I've done since I've completed that has really focused on a variety of areas that are on the intersection between occupational health, human factors, and technology, but all for the fire service. So it's all under that umbrella. So I have about a decade of experience in this space, which makes me feel really old now. But as I mentioned, I began my career working with the U.S. Navy, and I supported research and development as it related not only to just operations, but also training. A big part of it was after action reviews. How do we take the lessons that we've learned from different exercises, scenarios, things that we've done, and how do we apply that moving forward? Like, what's the proactive forward-looking approach? So I've been involved in small and large projects, everything from like billion-dollar research programs to smaller things, or, more narrowly scoped projects. So you can think of something, or an example of that would be, I did a project for the Coast Guard and the Navy in terms of damage control. So damage control personnel are the firefighters of the ship. There is no one coming to save you. You have to do it. So we literally took the paper manual that they sign off on for qualifications, and I was responsible for digitizing that. So how do you become a firefighter at sea, and how do we put that in an online platform so that you can assess competencies and qualifications? And that sounds like a really straightforward, easy process. But to Chief Oates' point, sometimes it really just isn't. And there's a lot of, red tape and barriers there. So kind of transitioning and focusing on what I'm doing moving forward. As I mentioned, I just started a new role with DC Fire. And so I'm speaking on behalf of myself and my opinions personally right now. This isn't necessarily representative of DC Fire. I just want to kind of disclaimer that. But in terms of what we're working on right now, we're taking those lessons learned with what's actually going on in operations, what's actually happening in training, what's happening in these different divisions. So I'm specifically centered in health and safety and compliance, but that reaches across the whole department. And so how do we balance those demands that our firefighters have and our EMS personnel? What are they doing? And what are the requirements of the job? And how do we all make that mash together and fit together in a way that serves the workforce? So revisiting that, kind of just thinking on this, the fire service as a whole, especially in DC, but honestly globally, we've really adopted knowledge from parallel professions. So to Chief Oates' point, we kind of focus on the fire service and we tend to reinvent the wheel a lot. We tend to kind of look at problems and we're like, well, this is fire service centric. But one thing I did want to encourage us to do is kind of take a step back and say, you know, we use aviation terminology, Mayday. We've adopted a lot of military principles because we are in a paramilitary structure or hierarchy in the fire service. So I think it follows that we can look at what's been done in the defense space, what's been done in medicine, what's being done in these other domains like mining and oil and gas, and kind of think about how do we apply that in ways that could serve our firefighters. So what I really wanted to touch on today and kind of talk to you all about is this idea of the term readiness. And so when we think about readiness in terms of the military, it's really connotating this idea that this is our current workforce's ability to effectively perform their assigned mission in combat, right? We're in times of combat. We're preparing for that. But as you can imagine, this includes things like obvious things like being properly trained, physically fit, having access to fully operational aircraft that's maintained, equipment that's maintained. And then there's also some not so obvious things like what does it take to be mentally prepared to go into battle or to engage in combat? And what does that look like at a moment's notice? So essentially when we like kind of think of the umbrella term readiness, it signifies a state of preparedness to really fight and fulfill our military duties when we need to. And so in the fire service, we kind of take a similar approach. And we're seeing that as it pertains to what's going on with OSHA right now. So if you haven't heard, we have the proposed emergency response standard from OSHA, and that's really pushing us right now to have this conversation and to think about these critical areas. So I just wanted to give a huge shout out to Chief Tobia. He testified yesterday and did an awesome job on behalf of IAFC, and I thought he really captured some of this beautifully. So if you haven't had a chance, definitely check that out. But when we break down what does it mean to be ready, we really like things in threes in public safety, right? Like, so I'm going to break it down in terms of 3 buckets. You can kind of think of it that way. And there's definitely more, but just for the purposes of this conversation, I think this kind of narrows it down. So we have our comprehensive assessments. That's like beyond just our skill set for what we need. So in aviation, that's beyond flying skills. It includes things like mission planning, situation awareness, decision-making. Are you proficient with your weapon systems? Do you know what you're doing? And then related to that, we have physical fitness and psychological fitness and the ability to handle high pressure situations. Those are all important aspects of readiness, right? Then we've got the second arm, which is training and proficiency. So we're conducting these exercises, we're individually training, but we're also training at the group level. We've got simulator sessions, we're documenting flight hours, we're documenting training fireground hours. And that's really crucial to maintaining readiness. Training is a huge component of that. And then we've got our equipment and our maintenance. And so it's pretty obvious, but to fly a plane, you have to have a plane that is actually operational and functional. So you need a well-maintained aircraft. You need the support systems to be able to do that. So maintenance crews, making sure that everything's where it needs to be. There's multiple checks and balances. And so I really just kind of wanted to touch on these areas because these are all areas that we focus on at TSI, but it might not be really obvious to us. So I'll be giving a presentation later in the week of TSI on understanding how wearables support readiness in the fire service. And there's some awesome companies out there doing some good work in this space, but I'm going to give a shout out to Chief Oates, my co-presenter, and Captain Mike Binney from West Metro. And they're really leading these really cool key initiatives that you'll want to hear about that focus on integrating planning and preparedness and what it means to be ready. So not just from the individual firefighter perspective, but what does that mean to scaling? What does that mean in terms of scaling this to a whole department or the external facing side of things? What does it mean looking at our communities? How does that fit in with firefighter readiness? And there's a ton of companies out there that are engaging in this at TSI. So I encourage you to kind of reach out and talk to them. But that's kind of what I wanted to pose to the group today. What does it mean to be ready for the fire service?
A lot of quotable moments there as well, Kate. Thank you so much. And now kind of round the horn here, Jason, I'll throw it to you. And then after this, we're kind of all of us, we're going to talk amongst ourselves. And for everyone in the audience, throw in questions, comments throughout this. And we're going to really ask you for any comments and questions after Jason's done. And we'll go from there. So Jason, floor is yours.
Thanks. I just got to meet everyone before this, right? And we were all talking about some similar things. And a lot of it was I think it was Chief brought up first that the fire service doesn't do well with change and technology development because of purchasing cycles or some of our culture or whatever it may be. And I'll start this off with a quote. Have you guys seen Moneyball? Do you remember the movie Moneyball? I believe it was the Boston Red Sox owner that said the first one through the wall always gets the bloodiest. And that is just, I feel like that's been my life. So, and being with this group, whether it's Caitlin, you know, looking at the human factor and trying to bring people forward and get them thinking ahead of time, or Chief John, like out there up above all the data, trying to look for the problems first and then initiate the action before that. Or if you're Marcus and you're down in that station software and you're trying to deal with the fact that every fire department in the world has different qualifications, different contracts, different rules. There's nobody in this country that is not struggling with staffing software and what can come of it. So Kevin, I'll just say, like, I just had the realization, like, TSI, like that's what this conference is. Like, it's people like us and people who are on our teams. And, you know, we're all parts of teams. We're not doing it by ourselves, but we live in that environment, whether it's our idea or it's someone else's idea, we're getting pulled into those and we're always there. And I forget, I think it was Marcus, you said the change management, like that's huge. My own company struggled with that. You know, IDEX Fire and Safety is a big company doing tons of stuff you've been using in the fire industry for 100+ years. And that company, when my automation came into that company, we had to change. It was change for us, you know, becoming like a systems solution or an engineered solution for the fire service. So not only did we have to change internally and get way out in front of the fire service on this and way out ahead of the other companies, you know, just from an R&D perspective, we had to learn to talk to the customers differently because someone, like, again, one of us was talking earlier, and it's about how people are always in not a negative position, but they always want to challenge something, or the barriers are always high, and there's always ways of dealing with that better. And most of that goes through like change management classes or learning the psychology of change or how to talk to people about something that's new and different. So, man, I've been living that life. It's been painful. It's not the fire service's fault. Like, you have to learn how to do new things. Like, that in and of itself is a challenge. So TSI, like, I enjoy going there because a lot of kindred spirits, a lot of people willing to talk about new things. And that conversation for any of us who want to bring the fire service forward is so important. And having groups like that together is really what helps get positive change. And to Chief John's point, like, change that we need, like, make sure you need that change, you know, that's a thing too. So there's plenty of shiny toys out there. So, you know, our passion is water flow. So that's where we live, but we are also getting into the data sector. So what's really cool about the fire services right now, if you think about your water flow components, they're all mechanical components. They have no intelligence. They can't talk. They can't do anything for you. There is so much data inside that water flow that is currently unattainable. And as our technology gets into the fire service more, we are chomping at the bit to get a hold of that data and start making use of it and get things out there. Currently, we're actually busy collecting data about the fire service, because if you do want to have a proper solution, you know, it is really hard for chiefs or people in the fire service to sell things to their, you know, they call them bean counters, whether it's accountants or city council, people who aren't in the fire service, who you can't just go to them anymore. Like you said, you can't, you know, I feel like this, or I think that. You need data. So we are trying to build that narrative where, you know, we've learned recently that this is just fire service data. Like 20% of the injuries happening at structure fires are related to pressure management, charged hose lines. So let's do some pressure control. You know what I'm saying? So there's a lot going on there. Like, Kevin's only given me 5 minutes, so I'll just stick with that one point. So, and I'm happy to do so. So, but yeah, that's kind of where my heart's at. I just, listening to all you all talk, like, I feel your passion and your pain at the same time. So it's really cool. And thanks for the time, Kevin, and looking forward to discussing all this stuff with everybody.
So a little round of snaps for everyone. That was wonderful. And thank you all. And again, part of it was short to allow for this now forum where we've got about 25 minutes or so to kind of allow the five of us as well as the audience to chime in, to kind of build on what you're talking about. And one thing that I want to lean into to kind of start us off here is I always get frustrated when you talk with certain entrepreneurs or certain new technology initiatives of like, oh, hey, we have this one widget that's, it's going to be great. It solves this awesome feature, but oftentimes maybe some of the entrepreneurs haven't really actually talked with the end user, the firefighter, to really understand what the true problem is. And to me, the whole point of technology in some capacity is not just to necessarily do something different, as John mentioned, but to really truly make the operations better, to save a little bit of time, to save a little bit of money, to just ideally make us better than we were before, not just to kind of have some vanity metrics about some technology that sounds good on paper. But would love to kind of hear and maybe throw it to you, John, because you kind of prompted this idea, but not just technology for technology's sake, but for technology to actually solve an identified problem and make the fire service better in some capacity. Where do you see this kind of missing the mark? And, what kind of thoughts in terms of, again, making us, putting us in the right direction? I don't want to only paint a pessimistic look on here, but then kind of throw it around to all of you, but I'll have you start first, John.
So I think it's in both directions, right? So I'll from the fire service perspective, is departments need to invest in wear test, R&D, experimentation. Like the organizational permissibility for experimentation in most fire departments is exceptionally low because we don't like to fail. And because the criticality of failure is pretty high, right? Like if we fail on the street, that's incredibly bad. We don't want to do that, but we should be able to spin things up in the fire station to, like, when a vendor comes and goes like, hey, what do you think about this? So we should be in that continuous cycle of learning and trying. And I don't care if it's PPE, I don't care if it's tools and equipment, I don't care if it's software, technology, whatever. You should be, and again, at all levels, small, medium, large. Oftentimes, vendors go to metro-sized departments to go like, hey, you want to try out our new widget? And they're like, sure, because they have scalability, they have people, they have money. Well, if it's going to work there, it might work at a community-sized fire department, but what's the value of taking it to a community-sized fire department? Somebody's serving a population under 100,000 to go like, hey, you want to beat this up and see if it's any good? That is beneficial for the fire department and for the vendor. Now, so that's goes both directions. We had a vendor when I was fire chief. We had a vendor come in with a radio communications based accountability platform, and we spent half a day with the gentleman. He came in and he demoed his product, and we had probably a half a dozen really skilled people in the room from our communications division and staff chiefs and line firefighters, and sat there and iterated, because he was looking at it from the tech space, and iterated from a fire service perspective, like, did you think about this? Did you think about this? This might work better. This is going to be a complication. Be aware of that. And I think we ruined the guy's day because he never came back again. But I think it's that sort of engagement of like, you're on to, and that's why I like, what Mark was talking about, what Jason's talking about. Like, you're on to something. Let's have that conversation about what we can do in order to make that better, right? Is that engagement. And I think we can't be the office of no, right? It's like, that'll never work. Like, well, the first person that pulled a motorized fire apparatus into a station that had a horse-drawn pumper got told the same thing. It's like, it's never going to happen. Well, we need to be open and engaging and have that continual understanding of like, all right, what's next? Because we get comfortable. When you get comfortable, you get lazy. And they're like, okay, let's see what's out there. And what I would fondly term, and it's a struggle for a lot of fire departments, is to peek over the fence and see we think we have the corner of all the knowledge and everything we need to do, and the way our department does it is the best thing ever. It's like, well, no, if you're not sending people to TSI, to FRI, to the National Fire Academy, to any of these learning opportunities across the country, to kind of peek over the fence and see what your neighbors are doing and go, all right, is that generalizable to my department? Are there things that we can do? You're missing an opportunity. So I think it's bi-directional. I think internally we need to get better about experimentation, and then we have to engage the vendor community, because it doesn't do any good. we get a robust wear test program for PPE, for gloves, for footwear, for garments, for helmets. Anytime we went and asked a vendor, like, hey, we're potentially going to buy X many sets, we'd like the set to try out. And they're like, okay, what's your evaluation matrix? Which we had one. Because it doesn't then do any good for the fire service to go like, that sucks. Like, well, thank you very much. That doesn't help. It's like, how do we make it better? What, is it for a glove? Is it dexterity? Is what it feels like when it's wet? Is it for a piece of technology? You look at the evolution in the portable radio space. We made knobs bigger and fatter because now we can turn them with a glove, something that other public safety entities don't have to worry about. So I think it's that. The last thing, and I'll shut up, is one of the things that Jason said, like something that we've spent some time on, but is something that I think we're missing an opportunity with, and it because it's hard and it involves proprietary information, is think about the richness of the data set. If we could overlay what your fire pump did, what your nozzle did, what your SCBA did, what your portable radio did, who was on duty, duration over time, exposure, and have a clear picture of the impact of a fire on a firefighter. And the problem is those are all disparate, disorganized, completely ungeneralized data sets. But holy cow, you look at something that can, for once and for all, paint like a really, really robust picture of the impact of fire on a firefighter. I'll be old and probably dead by the time it happens, but holy cow, it'd be awesome to as we continue to work to make that happen. I think it would be wicked cool.
Do you mind if I elaborate on that?
Sure, please.
What you said, like just at the most basic level, you mentioned like if you could take it from the pump to the nozzle and then to the person. If there's been a lot of people and even competitors of ours have done a great job at like looking at. I'm not so hung up on pressure. It's just what's going on right now is people trying to get hose and nozzle combinations right and nozzle pressures correctly. And so we found we just introduced new technology to the fire service about 1.5 years ago. And we have a nozzle that now pumps to its own pressure. So the nozzle now does talk back to the truck. And not to get hung up on the technology itself, but to your point, Chief, just doing that and having the technology there and this live information and the pressure control and a nozzle that makes its own pressure is really bringing up more conversation at a department that has never paid attention to that before. Well, our hoses aren't kinking anymore, or this is more comfortable, or that's more uncomfortable because they were always under pumping. So just introducing the technology from the valve controlling the nozzle to the nozzle itself and dealing with the hose in between, we're seeing with a lot of our customers, it's completely changed the way they're looking at stuff because they didn't do it before, right? It was just all a bunch of metal and leather and whatever else. So that's been very eye-opening for us as a company.
And I think the cool piece for any of us in this space, both from the fire department side and from the vendor space and from the people that are engaged in the science space, that right there is that's the moment, right, where you get somebody go like, oh, I get it, is why we all do this, right? Because that is going to immediately translate into better service to the citizen. And it's like, all right, cool. We have seen change, and it's pretty remarkable.
Yeah, and one thing I think that illustrates really well is like we always advise anyone in the fire service, expect and ask for and demand more from your technology vendors, not less. The standards are quite low in terms of what gets accepted, especially around these common problems around interoperability, common operating picture, all the, not just buzzwords, they're very important, but there are gaps that we're not able to get to in a huge part because CAD vendors haven't been willing to share data until legal cases have made it so they don't have a choice. Or if you think even RMS, going to nearest will be a huge help to anyone being able to pull out that data and then analyze it in a much more extensible way. But that's been a big part of the challenge where if the expectations are either low or because there's not a lot of technology exposure or hunting for different technology tools, you could very well get swept in a process that's actually not the best for the department, or you could have had higher expectations of what could be customized to work to.
I'm seeing a comment from Hostler. Thank you for that. And actually, I couldn't agree more. I think oftentimes just walking into the firehouse and walking in with food always really helps, but oftentimes just going in with no real expectations and trying to make a sale, but really trying to just learn. And for example, one example, actually, there's a local company here in Chicago called Ascent that's hosting an event tomorrow, and I worked with them to help just put flyers and bulletin boards. But where stuff goes down, the fire department is oftentimes at the kitchen table and the bulletin board. So couldn't agree anymore, Corey. And
yeah, that's actually how we started. I went door to door with just bags of coffee and said, "Hey, I've got some coffee. Can I talk to whoever does your staffing software?" And then they would just point me to a battalion chief who is on shift usually. Sometimes they would say, "Come in next shift." That's the tech savvy person. But yeah, just going door to door really helps for tech companies. So would definitely emphasize that, where it's a balance of, going there. And then once you're there, giving those tech companies a shot or trying a pilot where, maybe there's some risk aversion like Chief Oates, alluded to.
Bootstrapping 101 in public safety. And I think John and Jason, you would agree both in the fire service that every firefighter I've had the fortune of working with is all willing to give their time and their feedback if you ask them in the right forum.
I think the right forum, the right way, the right time, right? Like everybody's stupid busy and like the person's world is falling down around their head, and you're like, hey, do you got time for this? They're like, dude, I don't have time for what I have time for, let alone anything else. So I think it is all of that, but it is rare for somebody to say no, right? Is like, hey, we'd like to, but I think there's the follow through piece. There's a follow through on the organizations piece. There's a follow through on the technology piece. I want in something that's been nagging at my brain since Dr. Kate said it is the definition of ready for an individual and an organization is different. And I look at that similar to the fire service has these conversations about building individual resilience, and individual resilience is built in a different way than organizational resilience. And I don't know, do you see that parallel? Does that make sense? Or is that something that fits in what you're looking at relative to what ready means?
Yeah,
Kate,
I totally think so. So I'm going to nerd out here because this is something I love to talk about. But there was actually just a study that was published that talked about this idea of focusing on well-being apps and how that's not working in the UK for well-being programs overall. Like they're having no effect on resilience because you can't fix a broken culture by only fixing individual resilience, because part of the problem isn't just the individual, part of it is the organization. And so I think this ties into everything that you all are talking about here. I'm super excited because it's really talking about what does our workforce need, and then how do we get that to them. But then at the organizational level, that looks different, right? So it's kind of like thinking about these different ranks and how we all roll up, but how we all influence one another. And to me, that's really critical. Like the labor management piece comes into this, but it's also just bigger than that. It's like, what does the fire service as a whole need? And nationwide, I think we're struggling a lot with that. Like I know Marcus was mentioning some really important things about wildland before we started. Like that's one of those areas that's really underfunded and under-resourced. And I think when we think about, what's challenging us right now, that's part of it, right? Like we can't expect our wildland firefighters to be resilient just through an app that talks about well-being. And I'll leave it there for anyone else to jump in.
It's like it's been nagging at my brain. It's like, okay, we want people to be resilient, and I can see, there's an application to both Marco and Jason here from. I can see, a firefighter sitting, in the firehouse going like, all right, they want me to be resilient. Like, here's my reality. My fire station is a hovel that would have been torn down if it was anybody else's occupancy. The wheels may or may not literally fall off my fire truck when I go out the door. My company officer is a start raving lunatic, and I haven't had a raise in 4 years, and I may or may not be killed at my next incident I go to because I'm not a well-led, well-deployed department. But you want me to be resilient, so I'll get right on that, and it's you look at stuff like that, and it's I think in the tech space, it means so many different things depending on where you're at in the food chain. and Marco, I like think about like what does a scheduling software mean to a firefighter writing facing backwards versus what does a scheduling platform mean to the chief of department or the business analyst? Those are different things, right? Like that ends up being different things for different people, and how to address all that is really hard. So like, we got the best product ever for that, that little niche. It's like, well, no, we need more.
Yeah, it actually took us and I would say another 12 months to make sure we were ready to launch and start replacing staffing softwares, because it wasn't just build a better mousetrap, but you have to do 5 to 10x more to make it worth replacing a tool that's been there for 20 years.
Sure.
So like that's the baseline, plus all of these other features that would get you excited. So we've got, finance views for fire chiefs and finance folks that you don't have anywhere in the world, and then more end user mobile ones. But that's a big challenge of why it's hard for startups too. You need you need more funding or a really robust engineering team. You can't just build a single point solution for most fire service problems that still exist. Because like you said, the big intractable ones that need a lot of different stakeholders or integrations or more platform solutions, if any software is part of the solution, are kind of where we're at now with a lot of the big issues left. My take, at least.
Yeah, I noticed all bigger ideas are really hard to sell change to, right? Like, Chief, you hit the nail on the head. Like, Marcus is 3 different people. Like, one minute he's at the kitchen table with a guy or gal. Like, this is how you log in. This is how you see your shift changes and stuff. And then you got your battalion chief who's like pulling his hair out, trying to get slots filled, and that's a different decision maker. And then at the top of it, you got like, how do we get payroll out? How do we keep track of all these hours? And it's the same, any big ideas like that. Dr. Kate, I'm sure you're doing that where you're at. Like, you've got to talk to people, like this culture shift. So let's just say you decide you have some readiness. If you've got to get the troops out on the shop floor to buy in, to do whatever it is you need them to do. And then on the flip side, you've got to get support on the top to either make the time or fund the classes or whatever it is. And those are 2 different conversations all day long. And we personally struggled with that. Like, what we do is it shouldn't be controversial, but it's a big change. And so we always see people, I'm always out at these demos. I'm with the firefighters. I'm like, holy cow. Okay. I get it now. This is amazing, whatever. And then they go back to their firehouse and they just get their brains beat in. Like, they know the other people weren't there, right? They weren't there for the conversation. And I think anybody in any of our businesses here at the firehouse, and look, the fire service isn't so bad. Like, all the other industries have to deal with this stuff too. I just think we're better at making fun of each other, so the risk feels higher. There's the Chief John hammer in the back that never worked, and the Marcus software somewhere that somebody's mad at, and your name is always tied to it because in the fire service, you can't switch jobs. You have to retire there. So you're going to live with that. So we feel a lot of risk to make a change, and that's fair. Like, I get it.
Well, I know change is hard, and I know it's easy just to say no. Like, especially if you're I don't want to single out fire chiefs, but if you're a fire chief who's been working your entire life to get to that position, and you're going to be in that role for 5 years, like, if you're going to take a high risk and do something that could ultimately fail, it's way easier just to say no and keep the status quo. And I'm not saying that all departments and fire chiefs are like that by any means. It's very emblematic in many industries where you get to the top and then it's like, let's keep things the same. But I think when on that point in kind of this diving into change management for a second, and I'd love to know all of your kind of other ideas, nuances, personal experience in terms of like any strategies or examples of like how you've seen, how you've been able to like break a barrier or actually advance some type of progress where there was an ingrained, like, this is the way we do it. There's no changing it, but with a strategy, with the conversation, with critical mass. Any insights to effective change management that you've seen or experienced?
I think to your first point, it's okay to blow up a bridge if you know how to swim, right? If you're willing to take that risk. One of my really critical lessons came when I changed organizations. I left one organization as a shift commander, became chief of department in another organization. 8 miles apart, shared half a name, couldn't be more culturally different. They tried, and that's not good. That's not bad. That just is. And that became a point for me because there are things that we did in my old department that I wanted to bring to the new department. They're like, yeah, no, we're not going to do that. But then there were things that I wanted to do in my old department that I would have been, hung from a big tree that I took over there. They're like, yeah, sure, we'll try that. So I think understanding like the culture of your organization, and it is, where are they at? And I know culture gets used a ton, but is it a learning organization? Are there pockets of that? Are there people that are willing to experiment? Are there people that are tired of having the thumb on top of them that want to grow and that want to do stuff different? And understanding where you can make those inroads. And if there is a legitimate third rail, then don't touch it until you're ready and you build up the credibility to the point where they're like, all right, this guy's actually kind of got a clue. Let's figure out what we're gonna, what's next. And I think the humility too, to when we know that y'all have been in fire service long enough. There are people that are really good at billboard programs. And what I mean about billboard programs, they're like, we're gonna do this. It's gonna be the best thing ever. And then you ask them 90 days later, and they're like, yeah, we never finished that. We didn't do it at all. I think the sincerity and the follow through and doing things the right way, you'll get people to buy into it. So I think it's credibility of message, credibility of experience, and creating an environment where people are willing to experiment in ways that will help the organization and the people within the organization do a better job to provide service to the people that need the service. Because everything else after that's kind of window dressing.
And one thing I'll add to that, and to Jason's point, is a process that we've tried to employ is we say, get everyone in the room who would be angry they weren't there when the decision was made to change your staffing software. But like getting all those stakeholders early, we actually do it on virtual demos before we even go in person now, where ask any question, we can show any screen you want, and then we can always go through more steps. But there's so many different stakeholders to solve these problems that from a pure change management point of view, just think of there's 20 people to meet and you've only met 3 of them. You're not even close to on track to doing that. So we've tried to get that to be a really early part of our discovery process for one. And then the other is just making sure that the department person within them, like kind of the early adopter side of the spectrum, is tricky to find sometimes with trying something new. And to be an early adopter department, you only might need, a handful of those people. And that's where I think what Chief Oates said on really knowing the politics of how decisions are made for different things or what people might be sensitive to within each department is a nuance that's always going to be, one-off and just as unique as each department is. But I think an important part of getting the change actually done, where you get those early people to be your champions too.
Kate or Jason, anything from a change management perspective, whether it's built on that or something separate that you could share with us?
Yeah, I almost feel bad, Kevin. The only trip I've missed since I've been at this company for 6 years was FRI. I was supposed to do that 2-hour change management class for you, but would love to try that again. I apologize. But yeah, you're all kind of saying it in different ways. It's organizational buy-in, and you've got to have wherever the change is coming from or wherever the idea is coming from. Like you kind of have to know your role. Like, am I in the middle of the organization and I want to affect change? Well, you're going to have to get buy-in from above and below, right? And without it, I mean, you can battle your way through, or if you spend the time to get buy-in from the people who are going to use it or be affected by it and buy-in from the people who have to support it or whatever, taking the time to get that buy-in and not just thinking an edict is going to get it done. Like that's actually, there's graphs on that. Like it's, that's the wild thing. And I think the best thing I can say to everybody watching is you can go out and research change management. This is not a myth or magic. Like there is an enormous amount of information on doing change management because everybody's organizations are different. Everybody's challenges are different. Go out. If you feel like you're going to have to deal with this, go out, learn about it yourself and try to figure out how to apply those methods to your organization. There is a lot of information out there.
Well said, Jason. Kate, any firsthand or third-hand experience you got from a change management perspective before we round out here?
Yeah, so just briefly, I'll touch on, for my dissertation, I worked on pre-incident planning, which is probably one of the least interesting topics to most of the people in the fire service. If you go out and you talk to the people in the jurisdiction where I did my research in Florida, they would tell you, we don't even look at pre-plans. And that's such a missed opportunity. I realize that, it's because a lot of the challenges are related to what's the technology that you've used in the past? How familiar are you with some of these things? But if you've used something in the past that doesn't work, why would you want to rely on that moving forward? The fire service is life or death. We don't have time to sit here and open a pre-incident plan and have that take 5 minutes, 10 minutes. Your lieutenant or your captain is flying down the road. They're trying to find the right things that they need to get on scene and do their 360 and figure this out. So I think one of the things that I learned from that is kind of tying back to the idea that you need to be able to customize technology to meet the needs of the fire service where they are. And it needs to be something that I think when we look at the value add, like what does this actually contribute? Is this helping me build situation awareness? Like back to the whole conversation, technology for technology's sake. If we're not actually integrating this in a way that serves the fire service, what are we doing? How are we thinking about that? And so I know that seems kind of obvious, but I think pre-incident planning is one of those areas where we don't think about the training implications always. We don't think about the fact that we could use this afterwards to show exposures. We don't think about the idea that, when we look at after action reviews and lessons learned, we could use digital twins to recreate these scenes and figure out, okay, if you're the IC, what are you going to do next? And so I think there's a lot of missed opportunities in these areas that we've traditionally thought of as maybe ugly or not really serving us in the fire service, but there's a lot of opportunity to move that forward and make progress with technology, with the people in this room even.
I think that's a quote, Kevin, where Kaylin said, you have to build it to where they're at, right? Like so many of these companies are full of incredible, great teams of engineers who are super smart and super accomplished, and they'll build it the way that they want to build it sometimes versus the way that it needs to be used. And so for the companies out there listening like that, it's hard to do, and sometimes you just don't know, and you just got to throw something out there and get some feedback. But living in a vacuum, you can really give yourself a lot of headache if you don't build it to where they're at.
And almost have to do that in reverse from what do you need, where do you want to be, what do you want it to do, and then we'll figure out how to make the technology do that. And I think you're right, that's where a lot of successful people and places have done.
As if I wasn't already fired up for TSI, and couldn't agree anymore in terms of meeting people where they're at, and so many quotable and insightful takeaways here. And we are officially at the top of the hour. It's amazing how time flies when you're having fun. This is really what you can expect from TSI, just kind of high flying power conversations like this, somewhat structured, but mostly kind of loose flowing and really trying to learn and bring value, because we don't just want to host a webinar. We don't want to just host a show just because it's what we should do. We're doing it because we get to, and we're doing it because we need to. And I'm really excited for the opportunity to have all of you there, as well as just special thank you to Kate, John, Jason, Marcus. You're all just crushing it. I really deeply appreciate my friendship with all of you, as well as just the opportunity to collaborate. So thank you very much. And please reach out to me with any questions. I should have put this in the chat earlier, but my email is ksofin at, I don't know why, at iafc.edu.
It's never good when the tech guy has the tech problem.
Geez, yeah. Control-Alt-Delete. Save me, please. ksofin@iafc.org. So hit me up with any questions, hit me up with any comments. And again, thank you all for your time, and have a great rest of your Wednesday.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Take care.